August 13th, 2017. In Tajrish, a northern district of the Iranian capital Tehran, Anoosheh Ashoori is heading to the local market. He's carrying an empty suitcase. The zip is broken, and he's going to get it fixed.
And when I arrived at the end of the street, as I was going to turn right to go to Tajrish, a car pulled over and 4 men came out. They surrounded me and they asked for my name.
Anoosheh gives the men his name. They order him into the back of the car and drive away. August 13th, 2017 marked day 1 of an ordeal for Anoosheh Ashoori that would last another 1,672. My name is Rosie McCabe. Welcome to the New Arab Voice.
And as we were driving, and I didn't know what was happening, I thought perhaps I was being kidnapped or something. You are perplexed. You don't know what is going on. It's happened so quickly. Then the guy next to the driver, he turned around, he gave me a piece of paper, which was my arrest warrant.
The Iranian security services arrested British-Iranian Anoosheh on espionage charges. In the car, Anoosheh was blindfolded and taken to a house, where the first of many interrogations began. After a number of hours, he was put back into the car and driven to his mother's home.
So we went inside, and they knew exactly what they were looking for. Unlike other cases where you see that the houses are ransacked and everything, we just went to my room. They asked me to sit on a chair in front of the dressing table, and they started dismantling the desktop, and they asked for my laptop, for my passport. They asked me if I have any money. And to their disappointment, I only had £40 in my pocket, and that was for when I returned.
Anoosheh's interrogator told him that if he cooperated, he would be quickly released. Concerned that his mother, who was out of the house at the time, would worry about him, Anoosheh left a note saying he was spending the night with a friend. From his mother's house, Anoosheh would be taken to the notorious Evin prison.
You can divide your stay at Evin in 2 phases. Phase 1 is when you are being interrogated, and there are certain interrogation centers. For example, 209 belongs to the intelligence. There is another one, 240. There is another one, 211, which all belong to different, for example, Ministry of Defense or the IRGC.
Human Rights Watch has documented multiple testimonies of inmates held without charge being subjected to abuse and inhumane conditions in 209. Prisoners are placed in solitary confinement in a cell measuring around 1 metre by 2 metres, the rights group reported. During interrogations, people are forced to sign confessions in conditions that amount to, quote, psychological and physical torture. Many are denied medical care and are completely cut off from their family. During this first phase of imprisonment, Anoosheh was repeatedly interrogated and accused of being a spy, charges he and his family continued to deny. The apolitical British citizen was being subjected to the same trumped-up charges that dual nationals before and after him would face. Regardless of what Anoosheh told the interrogators, they created their own narratives.
The more honest you are, the more detail you give them, they use that against you, and they try to extract what they wish to do from it. And they write their own reports according to their own wishes, not according to what you have written. My interrogator told me, if you are not cooperative, then you will be here for a long time. You will see springs come and go, you will see autumns come and go, winters come and go, and we have the authority to keep you for 2 or 3 years, and then we can ask for an extension, then there will be another 2 or 3 years. So your mind shuts down when you hear things like that.
At Anoosheh's lowest point, he attempted suicide. Sitting in his London living room, he pulled up the sleeve of his shirt and showed us the white scar still visible across his wrist. The reality as to why Anoosheh was being held in Evin would only become clear to him months after his initial arrest. The dual national, like Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe, was being used as a pawn in a dispute over a decades-old debt. A geopolitical struggle between Iran, the country in which he was born, and Britain, the country where he had made his home and raised his family. Prior to the Iranian Revolution of 1979, Iran paid the UK for tanks. With the overthrow of the Shah, the British government never delivered the weapons and also never returned the money. The Islamic Republic wanted their money back. Anoosheh and his wife Sherry Yazidi only puzzled together the connection between the incarceration and the debt after an encounter with an anonymous figure as he waited outside a courtroom, handcuffed to a soldier.
In one of those days that there was a lot of movement in there, this person came to me and sat very casually and said, "Oh, well, what are you here for?" And I said, "Well, this is my case. Of course, you're not allowed to talk." But the soldier that was next to me, I think he was busy talking to the other soldier who was handcuffed to another person. And he said, "Don't you think that you are related to a deal, a debt, something like that in that context?" And I said, "What debt? What deal?"
Anoosheh would be sentenced in September 2018 to 10 years in prison for cooperating with a hostile state and a further 2 years for obtaining illicit funds. During court proceedings, he would represent himself after judges rejected all of the lawyers that he had chosen. His trial would later be branded by Amnesty International as, quote, grossly unfair. The majority of Anoosheh's sentence would be spent in Hall 12.
All those with the accusations similar to mine are actually placed in one place, which was that dungeon, which was the famous Hall 12. It is like a small village, although it consists of 5 rooms, one small corridor at the end of which you have got the toilets and a few shower cabins. We had a small patio and we could use the fresh air in there. But inside Hall 12, we were living in those 5 rooms. Sometimes 60 of us were there, about 15 in each room.
With so many people living in such close proximity, certain understandings had to be reached between inmates.
When I entered room number 1 in Hall 12, about 13, 14 people there, the first thing they showed me was a piece of paper which was stuck on the wall with instructions written on it. 1, 2, 3, 4. And they told me that this is the result of so many incidents that had happened in earlier time. So many prisoners have participated in actually creating this list, that the newcomer should come and read it. So once you get settled down, please go and read that. For example, you shouldn't floss inside the room, or you shouldn't break winds inside the room, or you shouldn't blow your nose inside. Among us, we had agreed that after lunch, from 2:30 to 4:30 is peace time. You should, if anybody wants to have a nap. But then you would see somebody start reading a newspaper, and as they turn the pages, it would actually annoy somebody else. So we had to consider those things. Sometimes it was okay, but sometimes it wasn't. And sometimes it led to conflicts between people.
According to Anoosheh, the prison officials believed those accused of being spies might influence other prisoners. But that didn't stop them from influencing each other.
We had the representative of our hall, who was also a prisoner. He came to me and he was very much interested in poetry. We were talking about different things. Then he recited a poem from a famous poet, a Persian poet, Sohrab Sepehri. It really moved me. And I said, "Well, can you do another one?" And he said yes, and he could do it with so much feeling. And as he was reciting that poem, another friend joined, and he also recited a poem. So the 3 of us were actually together, and the 4th one came. And we said, "Well, that was nice, so let's repeat this."
Soon, a poetry society was formed.
We ended up to be about 7 or 8, or in that order. And then we allocated the room of that rep. And then we used to spend about 2 or 3 hours twice a week in that room. And anybody who was interested would join, but only about 8 of us were there. We had the best of our time during those hours that we were together.
Over time, The members of Evin's Poetry Society went beyond reciting poems or reading them from the few books available from the library. They used their experiences inside Evin, as well as their memories of and longing for the outside world, to inspire verse.
There are some beautiful poems there describing their own worlds inside what I used to call it a coffin, because it is 1 meter by 2 meters. This is your world, this is your home. And it's going to be your home for 10 years. So when you lie down and when you look up only half a meter away, it's your ceiling, it's your sky. And that actually gave a lot of inspiration to those who had talents in poetry to write beautiful things that would actually make your tears come down. And then they used to come and read poems for me, praising their wives, saying how much they miss their kids. Oh, the pain. It's like the blues that appeared in the States, explaining the suffering of black people when they were going through their hard time. These poems are exactly of the same wavelength. They actually materialize the pain that they are going through. Yes.
And Anoosheh, as a dedicated member of the society, was even gifted with a poem by one of the other members.
There were quite many who were interested in poetry, but I know only 3 who had talents of poetry. So one of them, when he discovered it was my mom's birthday, one day he came to me and said, well, I have written something for your mom to give to her.
نباشد عاشقی برتر ز مادر بشر مدیون این بانوی برتر.
No one can love better than a mother. Humanity is in debt to this amazing lady. She sacrifices her youth and energy without even raising a complaint. She sacrifices for her children so they can grow and earn their lives. Her deep emotions can be felt from her fingers. Her teardrop is more valuable than the sea. If she finds her children joyful, she will have tears
The
of
Poetry
joy.
Society provided a form of community and an outlet for creativity during an incredibly bleak time for Anoosheh and fellow inmates. And the sharing didn't stop with poetry.
When we were in Hall 12, we had this lecturer, he had a PhD in economics, and he started teaching us macroeconomics, microeconomics, managerial, a very good friend. We had another one who had a PhD in geography. He knew, for example, the geography of the United States back to front. I mean, amazing. When we were moved to Wing 4, and then I met such fine people who were the environmentalists who are still there. Even there, they started teaching and lecturing about the environment. This friend of mine, who is an ex-diplomat, he could speak Spanish very well, so he started teaching us Spanish. So about 7 or 8 of us were learning Spanish. Another one started teaching about the mechanism of the heart, of the human heart. So we had that. The most recent one was philosophy. So we started from pre-Socratic philosophers, and we went to Aristotle, Plato, all of that. In fact, when I was released, I had finished Middle Ages. I was just going into the post-Middle Ages ones. So many things. We used to find each other.
Anoosheh called it Evin University. As the students waited for freedom in a geopolitical purgatory, they shared their knowledge and skills. It was a way to pass the days, weeks and months, and brought them together, a shared struggle.
Well, you see, when you get there in that little village, people get to know each other. And when you are there for 5 months, 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, you get to know each other like a family. You get to know their pain, their sufferings, what their families are going through. So we bond.
When Anoosheh was arrested in August 2017, his wife Sherry was in London. Thousands of miles away, Sherry was unsure what to do, who to speak with, and where to turn for help.
You're not trained to deal with these situations, you know. You don't go through your life training for having one of your family members taken hostage generally. So you go to someone who knows about it. And funnily enough, we were so inexperienced that for 9 months we didn't even know we could go to the Foreign Office and ask for help. We didn't go to Foreign Office until June 2018.
At first, Sherry reached out to the British Home Office for help. She found little solace and was turned away. Eventually, the UK Foreign Office did take responsibility, but their initial advice to Sherry was to keep quiet.
But you see, they never tell you directly to be quiet. They say that it's better for you because they can say, we don't dictate course of action. We just advise. So they advise you to be quiet, to give diplomacy a chance, and of course you trust them, because who else are you going to trust?
2 years into Anoosheh's imprisonment, silence was no longer an option.
Yeah, it was actually the Iranians who forced our hand, because when his appeal process and everything ended, it was September 2019, and it was the Iranians who outed him in a way. They probably thought, why they're not going public with this, because what's the point of having a hostage when nobody knows about it? So they were the ones who announced it on national television. They said, we've just sentenced, a British dual national, Anoosheh Ashoori, to 2 sentences of 10 years and 2 years for being a spy. And I remember it was like early morning, I got a text from the Foreign Office warning me that this has now been broadcast and, you're going to be inundated. And when they did that, I thought, well, now is the time to go public, and which is when we started going public. It was September 2019.
Yet, even after the case went public, the British Foreign Office consistently denied the connection between Anoosheh's fate and other dual nationals to the UK's historic debt.
No, they denied it any time after we brought it up. I think up until 2021, the FCDO policy was always to deny any link between the debt and hostages. They were always reluctant to actually to acknowledge that there was a link. And so it took us about 4 or 5 years just for them to acknowledge that, no, there is a link. They always denied it, always. They always said, I remember up until it was 2021 September, I talked to James Cleverly on the phone. He'd gone to the UN General Assembly where they were hoping to meet with the new president. And that was just after Liz Truss had been appointed. And I asked him, and I said, did you discuss the debt? And he said, well, I can't really comment on that, but there's no connection between the debt and your cases anyway. So
eventually, the debt was paid, announced by Foreign Secretary Liz Truss in the same letter that confirmed Anoosheh and Nazanin's release, dated March 16th, 2022. Details about how the debt was paid and what form the payment took remain unclear, even to Anoosheh and Sherry. They attribute the failure to bring Anoosheh home not down to individuals of the Foreign Office, but to a failure of process. An inquiry, the couple said, will not return the years lost, but may provide some answers for those left behind.
I don't know about closure, but it might help other people who are still there, possibly. It might give their families something to cling to, if they actually find out why is it that almost 5 years of his life had to be wasted, 6 years of Nazanin's, miss her kid growing up, when this debt could have been paid many years ago. Why did they have to go through this suffering? So it might be good to get an answer to that, actually. Yeah.
Sherry's advice for families of other dual nationals still stuck in Evin: let your voice be heard.
I was often asked over the years, given the choice, would I have publicised this earlier? And I always say in a heartbeat, I wish I'd publicised it from day one when he'd been arrested, because, and that's what I'm urging all the remaining families to do, to make their voices heard. It is good to be outspoken. You won't get anywhere if you're not. You'll be forgotten.
Now back in South London, Anoosheh and Sherry want to start a new chapter in their lives. Anoosheh plans to turn his prison diaries into a book. After hours spent running around the small prison exercise yard, he is now continuing with his fitness routine and has ambitions to run the London Marathon. Sherry plans to sign them up for ballroom dancing. While they are overjoyed at Anoosheh's return, their experience of the last 5 years has only strengthened their resolve to see the return of all dual nationals that unjustly remain behind bars in Iran. And both are adamant. They will not stop speaking out.
And those were the 2 years that were wasted, that if I was outspoken, perhaps I would be with my family. Nazanin would be back earlier. So you must speak out. And you must demand your rights.
The New Arab Voice reached out to the UK Foreign Office during the reporting of this story. They sent us this reply.
From the Prime Minister down, this government was always committed to securing the release of Anoosheh Ashoori. It was always entirely in Iran's gift to do this, but UK ministers and diplomats were tireless in working to secure his freedom and are delighted that he is now home.
The New Arab Voice is written and produced by Hugo Goodridge and Rosie McCabe. Our theme music was by Omar El Phil. The New Arab Voice will be back next week. Until then, you can find all our previous episodes on all major podcast platforms. You can also check out our Instagram page and Twitter account, both at The New Arab Voice, for additional content. You can subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode, and you can also rate and review, which helps us spread the word. Don't forget to follow The New Arab on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram for all the latest news from the region.